So welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us on this Friday. We are Nick and Bob Slater, the authors of Look Out Above, The Young Professional's Guide to Success. We are all about helping you make the most of what we call the first five. That's the first 5 or so years in the workplace, in the professional life after you finish college or graduate school. And our objective is to help you be different and to be better. That is to stand out while fitting in. So before we really get going today, a couple of administrative notes. First, a recording of today's session will be available soon on our website. That's bobandnickslater.com. And you can also, well, the second part of the administrative note is you can also find other helpful content there as well on the website, as well as a free chapter of our book. So please go check it out if you haven't done so already. We are updating it weekly. So about today's session, it's going to be all about presenting. And specifically about how to structure a compelling and effective presentation. So we believe that presenting is an essential skill that you absolutely must have in your arsenal. Now, you want further proof? That's fine. Here are some statistics. So in a study of 400 employers, oral communications was ranked as the most important business skill. It's number one and considered very important by more than 95% of those employers surveyed. Here's another one. In a study of company directors, 63% believe that presentation skills are more important for career success than intelligence or financial aptitude. And over a third of these same directors felt that poor presentation skills had hindered their career. Now, finally, here's a name you'll probably recognize. Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway and investment fame told MBA students, you can improve your value by 50% just by learning public speaking. And that's what he did early on in his career. He went back to school just for a public speaking course and said it helped him immensely. So the higher you go in your organization, and generally we think the higher you go in business, the more you'll be called upon to speak. We believe that your ability to present will likely impact how high you go career-wise. One Fortune 500 executive sums up what's true in most companies. He said, almost no one attains an executive position without being an excellent presenter. So presenting is important. Even fashionistas, which honestly the Look Out Above author team probably can't claim to be, agree on the importance of presenting well. So Glamour magazine says public speaking is the #1 work skill you need. And if Glamour says it, you know it must be spot on, as they say here in England. So in our book, Look Out Above, we devote a whole chapter to presenting, and we break that chapter down into the three pillars of any presentation. That's structure, graphics, and delivery. And today we're going to focus on the first pillar, that's structure. So we're going to give you a presentation structure that will serve you well your entire career. So after that intro, let's get started. So Dad, why don't you start us off?
Sure, Nick. So the structure we're going to give you today is battle tested. We start with it every time we have a presentation to give. And over my career, I've just done a lot of presentations. It's just happened that way, to employees, to industry colleagues, to investors, and to college and MBA students. I actually did a road show both here and abroad, taking a company public. So that's public speaking. So having failed enough times, I've come to learn the techniques that really work. And whether most people know these techniques, most business folks, I can't say. What I can say with certainty is they don't apply them. So I think there's great success for you ahead as a presenter if you do. We're not talking about speeches so much here as business presentations. We do address speeches in the back of our chapter, Look Out Above, but this is about a garden variety business presentation. This is a structure you're going to want to use. So you start with this kind of concept. What does the audience want to know? Well, they want to know 5 things from you or whoever is presenting. And so good presenters make sure they cover these 5 things. The first one is the topic. What am I talking to you about? Don't make them kind of glean it, figure it out. Tell them, here's what we're talking about. We'll show you how to do that. What it is you're trying to accomplish with your remarks. Why are you standing in front of me blowing hot air? Number 3, the most important one, is why should they care? Why should they listen to you? Why should they focus? Why should they not be checking their cell phone while you're talking? What's the benefit for them? Called the WIFI. What's in it for you? Then your message. What do you want them to know? And then a call to action. This is business. You're not giving a talk just to give a talk. There must be something you want people to do. And a lot of speakers forget that. So we're going to give you a 7-step structure for any presentation. And it forces someone to answer all 5 questions. If you follow this structure, you cannot fail to satisfy the audience desire to get these 5 questions answered. So, and it'll help you deliver an audience focused message, which is really the key to being a great speaker. So Nick, why don't you tell us step 1?
Sure, Dad. Thank you. So for step 1 out of 7, it's going to be start with an opening gambit. So we've all heard the expression, um, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So similarly in presentations, you only get one chance to start strong. So make sure that you do start strong. To launch your presentation, you take the front of the room or the end of the table, the podium, the stage, wherever you're going to be giving your presentation from. So take that position, make eye contact with your audience, and pause briefly. So in the game of chess, it's a small initial move that's intended to set up subsequent, more influential moves. This concept is largely the same in a presentation. So in a presentation, your opening gambit is your opening remarks, and its purpose is threefold. So one, the purpose is to give the audience a moment to settle in, get comfy before you tell them your topic. The second purpose is to capture the audience's attention and their interest. And finally, the third purpose is to reinforce or establish, if the audience doesn't know you, your likability. So if you've read our book, you know that at the outset of each chapter, we start things off with a quote. So in our presentation chapter quote, we used Calvin of Calvin and Hobbes fame in his opening gambit while he was delivering a book report in front of his class. It's a pretty irrelevant story about his trip to the library to explain why he's unprepared for that presentation. So what he's doing there, he's setting up with his opening gambit the rest of his thoroughly inadequate presentation. And I'll let you guess how it lands with his teacher. It's not so well. But for small group company presentations, you're likely going to be expected to get down to business pretty quickly. So make your opening gambit brief. For example, if you're presenting the reason why your team missed its numbers or next year's budget or the need for a new, say, software platform, something like that, it's probably best not to begin with the story. There's no need. No one's really looking for that. Begin instead with a quick thank you for the opportunity to speak, and at most a reference to or humorous quip about something that just happened at the company or externally in the news. Then get right into it. Get right into your presentation. Now, for large group presentations like a company town hall meeting or a training session or even a conference, a more extensive opening gambit is recommended. So what do you do then? So the most important thing to remember is that no matter which opening gambit kind of idea, and we'll give you a couple of those in a second, whichever one you use, it's got to tie to your topic. That's absolutely most important. So here are a couple of opening gambit ideas. You could use or start with something in the news that relates to the group you're speaking to. You could go with a question asking for a show of hands or a rhetorical question just to make a point. You could give a look back in time or an analogy or familiar saying. You could present the audience with an unusual or shocking fact or statistic. I like that one particularly. And finally, you could use a personal story. Of course, that's not an exhaustive list. Those are just a few examples. But again, the important thing, the absolute most important thing is that your opening gambit is tied to your presentation topic. Then if you can inject humor into your opening gambit, we say have at it. Absolutely. So the humor could, for example, be in how you connect a seemingly unrelated event, fact, or story to your topic. But we would warn that don't stretch too hard to inject humor to be funny. That's not the goal, especially if it's inappropriate. You're likely going to be met with nervous laughter at best. You could get, cold, stony silence at worst from your audience if your humor doesn't land. So beware, but don't be afraid to use humor if it's appropriate. And finally, don't apologize for your nervousness. And don't say before I begin or, oh gosh, definitely don't say, I didn't prepare any remarks. So once you're up there in front of your audience and once you say something, anything, you've begun, like it or not. And the audience expects you to have prepared.
So let's talk about step 2. I'll make one quick comment on the opening gambit. So when I write a speech or a presentation, often I save the opening gambit for last because it's the hardest part of the speech, or the presentation, even though it may take only 30 seconds to deliver it. You have to find something that really grabs people. And if you just sit around looking for that opening gambit, time goes by. So I find it's better to get going on that. I start with what we're going to talk about now, topic, objective, and audience benefit. And then I work on my presentation, and sort of then the opening gambit kind of reveals itself. But I find that to be the hardest part of any presentation is that beginning.
So
You
that's
really
in the
like
presentation, of course, not in the actual or sorry, in the preparation, not in the delivery, of course. It's like coming up
Right.
with the opening argument in law.
Yep.
Cool.
So you can do that last in terms of your order of preparation.
Very cool.
So step two is really where a lot of the magic is and where a lot of presenters fall down. So it is state your topic, objective, and audience benefit. So obviously, as to the topic, the audience wants to know what it is you're talking about. And so transition from your opening gambit with something like, well, this brings us to today's topic. And we like a two-part topic sentence, a broad statement followed by the specific thing you're going to talk about. It's really very easy, such as this. Our topic today is business intelligence software, and specifically how we're going to implement our new platform. So you got the broad business intelligence software, then the specific. Or today we're going to talk about the budget. That's the broad, and specifically how we're going to make our numbers after a disappointing last year, something like that. Then tell them your objective. So now that I know what the talk's about, what are you hoping to accomplish up there, Mr. Presenter? So when you're finished with a presentation, what will the audience have gained? So my objective this morning is to explain what the marketing team can do for you and how you can access our services. And then this objective that you have leads to the most important one you're going to end with, was why should they care? Why should they care about the topic? Why should they care that you achieve this objective? And that's the audience benefit. So the audience wants to know, why does this topic, why do I care? Why should I pay attention? Why should I give a damn? And really they shouldn't unless you tell them and make it clear to them why they should focus and pay attention. Again, we call it the WIFI. Many presenters make no attempt to connect the dots. I'm just telling you about my company and, whether this helps you at all with your company or your business or your personal career, you have to figure that out. No, you come at it with the attitude that I'm going to provide something that benefits the people in this audience. So I need to know who they are and something about them. So don't make your audience guess why it's important to them. You're going to tell them and you're going to be direct about it. You care about the budget because hitting next year's numbers is important to you because this matters to you because. So you tell them why they care, and that will get their attention. So the audience. So what kind of audience benefits are out there? Well, it could be benefiting from news you're delivering to them that they don't know, following directions you're providing, learning a skill you're teaching, preparing for a change with your advice, using your solution to solve a problem. There are tons of audience benefits. So let's put one together and show how it flows. Topic, objective, audience benefit. So here's an example. Again, the topic sentence is going to have a broad and narrow component. Today's topic is marketing, and specifically implementing new initiatives to attract, close, and retain new customers. So there's your topic. My objective this morning is for you to learn these initiatives and the thinking behind them so that you can effectively implement them. So now what's missing? You end with the audience benefit. Implementing these marketing objectives is important to you because doing so will defend and increase our market share and ensure the continued financial success of our company. If you can add to a personal element to the audience benefit, like help us all be successful and get bigger bonuses, if there's a tactful way to say that, adding a personal as well as a business WIFI is a really cool thing to do. So there you go. Step two, topic, objective, audience benefit, boom, boom, boom. Come right after another. It takes about 30 seconds to do all three of them,
Right.
if that.
That's great, Dad. Thank you. So there's step two. Now on to step three, which is preview your call to action. So you want to forecast what you want your audience to do with your presentation. So business presentations are a call to action. So why give a presentation if no action flows from it? Like, what's the point? Surely you want people to do something, or at least get started along a path as the result of your presentation. So after providing your audience the WIFI, that's the what's in it for you, then preview what you're going to be asking them to do when you finish your talk. So if you don't want to reveal your call to action at the outset of your talk, that's okay. In fact, we'll talk about it in a little bit. That can be a strategic move. That's fine, but let the audience know at the beginning that you're going to be asking them to act at the end of your presentation. So at the least, that should ensure that they're going to pay attention during your presentation. You can tell your audience, for example, when I finish, I'll ask you to do 3 things, but I'll save those until the end. So here are the questions. What do you want them to do? What are you going to ask your audience to do with your presentation? So if you're teaching them a skill, ask them to use it. If you're providing them direction, ask them to follow it. If you're imparting knowledge, ask them to apply it. If you're providing a solution, ask them to implement it. Now, if you're revealing an opportunity to them, ask them to pursue it. And finally, if you're proposing a new product or a new service or a new vendor, ask them to support it. Those are great calls to action. Now, during the planning period, if you're struggling to find a call to action, keep asking yourself, to what end am I giving this presentation? Or more bluntly, I like to ask myself, what's the point? Why have I been asked to do this? Why does my audience need to know what I'm telling them? So a couple of answers that are not acceptable are, I just want to keep them informed, or I just want to alleviate concerns, or even worse, I've been tasked with this presentation by my boss. That's not good enough. So to what end? Why does the audience need to be informed? What concerns do they have, and why is it important that you alleviate them? So keep thinking, keep planning, and keep brainstorming really until you find your call to action, because it's critical. And then to be safe, confirm with your manager or whoever directed you to give the presentation that your requested action is the right one, that you're on the right track.
Okay, so here's step 5, and this is the end of the introduction. So steps 1 through 5 would take 5 minutes at most, depending on the length of your opening gambit. So obviously you've got a message to deliver, which Nick will talk about in a second, but the introduction does not take long. It's going to be quickly done. But this final step of the introduction, which is step 4, is provide a roadmap and time forecast. So a roadmap, you already know, and most good presenters do this. They put up a slide that shows the 3 to 5 major points of their presentation and how they've organized it. So it's helps people remember it and take away more benefit from the presentation, because they know where it's going before you get in the car to go there. So we're going to talk about these 3 things, and you lay that out with a roadmap slide. Now, if your talk's less than 15 minutes, you may not lead a roadmap slide to your presentation, but if it's longer than that, I certainly would do one. Then you forecast the time, and this does a lot of good things. Number one, it's really impressive. You can say, I'm going to speak for 25 minutes. We're going to talk about this first item on the roadmap for 5 minutes, or I'm going to spend 20 of it on the first item. Don't be concerned, because we're going to do the last 2 items in 5 minutes. Whatever your time forecast is, it shows the audience you know what you're doing, and you're going to end on time, which alleviates that concern, and you've timed it. So obviously you can't provide a forecast of time if you haven't timed your speech. So you have to practice it, learn it, and know how long it's going to take, so you can give the audience that nice little benefit of knowing how long you're going to spend on each item. And don't assume you know how long it will take. I give a lot of presentations. I got cocky one time on one in California, and I didn't time it. And I got to my hotel room and I felt guilty, and I said, well, I'll just time it. I was 20 minutes long, awful. And I've done them a bunch, so I should have known better. But I was up half the night editing, making it better and shorter, but just I didn't do the job. So forecast the time. That's a really cool thing to do. So with this introduction, you've now addressed 4 of the 5 questions I talked about a minute ago. You've stated the topic, your objective, their benefit. You've covered the WIFI, and you've introduced your call to action, what it is I'm going to want you to do at the end. Even though if Nick said you say, I'm not ready to tell you now, that's fine. And you've also provided a roadmap of where you want to go. So it's clear to the audience, you know what you're doing. You've got this thing figured out, you know what the benefit to them is, and you can talk, right down to almost the minute what you're going to be doing up there. So that's very impressive. So now the introduction's done. It's taken you 5 minutes or less. And now it's time for step 5, which is to actually deliver the message. So Nick, I'll let you cover that.
Sure thing. Now this part's pretty important, as you could have guessed. But first I'll add, just talking about the roadmap real fast, it's critical, not just for the audience, I think, but in the planning of your presentation. Putting together a good roadmap helps you put together your presentation. It's like when we wrote Look Out Above, it's like outlining each chapter. You don't just start writing, you don't just write a book or write your presentation, you plan it first, and that really helps you determine where the book is going. So roadmap benefits.
I'll just agree with you. I think it's the first thing you do.
I do too.
You're not worried about the opening gambit. You're worried about how am I going to hold this present? What are the bones of this presentation?
Absolutely.
What do I really want to convey, and what's the best structure to do it?
Right. I think that's where you start. So here we are. It's step 5. Now we're finally ready to actually deliver your message and give the presentation. So like we just said, you don't just start talking, but you want to organize your message using some kind of logical flow. So we're going to be talking about different presentation structure types here. We call them flow structures as well. So for the body of your presentation, you want to choose a flow structure that makes your message easy to follow. That's paramount. Make it easy to follow. Don't challenge your audience too much in terms of structure or followability, to make up a word. So we've got a couple of possible flow structures coming up here in a second. That's, again, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's an example of some that really worked well for us in the past. So this flow structure type we'll call progression. So the first one is kind of the natural flow. When you're listing steps in a process, of course, you're going to list them in the natural order they would occur. Chronological, so that's events over time. You would put them in chronological order, makes sense. And then finally, numerical also makes sense if you're presenting items in an intentional order based on a number. So that's progression. There's some audience-focused flow structures as well. You can present a problem and a solution. So that is, you present a problem to your audience, and then how we as a company will solve it. You can do the features slash benefits approach, which is what we offer. Say you're rolling out a new benefits package, HR package or something, and how it's going to benefit you, the audience. And then you can do the opportunity realization approach, which is you present an opportunity and then talk about how we as a company will capitalize on it. So that's audience focused approaches. Now, here are some other kind of random structures you can use. This might bring you back to your literary days if you were an English major like I was. So you can go with parallel structure, which is you repeat the same structure for each successive item in your presentation. You can compare and contrast, which is a time-old structure of you can talk about how two or more things are alike or how they're different or both. And finally, this is kind of a funky one, but you can turn to the world of music and lyrical song, and you can present, say, fact, 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 refrain, and then you go with a new fact, 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 refrain again. It kind of mirrors the verse, verse, chorus structure of many popular songs. So that's not the whole list. There are more possibilities for flow structure. They include using a case study or pilot results, a story or a parable. Those can be really effective as well in your talk. Or you can use a structure that you devise, or a hybrid structure, which is cool idea. So in a hybrid structure, you kind of mix and match flow structures as needed. And as needed will become more apparent as you give more and more presentations. So for example, there you could have, 3 acts, 3 major sections to your presentation, but use a features, benefits, or parallel structure within them, kind of a mix and match. But as always, the test for your structure, for your presentation, for your organizational plan is whether it's easy for the audience to follow and remember. So don't get caught up in which structure you use. Most importantly is that it's easy for the audience to follow. Now, if your roadmap is easy for the audience to follow, your message should be as well.
So I'll just add to that.
Sure.
That's great, Nick. Obviously, you're going to try to make it as interesting and memorable as you can, no matter what the topic and how boring it may seem on its surface. So how do you do that? Well, you use stories, examples, analogies. I really like to use analogies. And another technique, if you can do it, numbers, big numbers particularly, don't have any meaning to people because they can't really get their head around them. But if you can reduce them to images, that's much more powerful to show the impact of those numbers. So in our book, we talk about a pretty common example of a train hitting a car, horrific event. But the point is that the train engineer doesn't even know he or she hit the car because of the weight ratio. So you could say, well, a car weighs 3,000 pounds and the train weighs, 6,000 tons, but nobody can relate to that. But if you said a train hitting a car is the same weight ratio as a car driving over a can of Coke. Everybody's driven a car. Everybody can probably hit a can of Coke in the road or can imagine it. And you go, wow, that's nothing. I won't even feel a shudder. And so it makes the point much better than just reciting the numbers. And then lastly, and I suffer from this, but you want to be as brief as you can. You don't need to say any more than is necessary for the audience to receive the benefit that's been promised once you achieve your objective. And so that's the test. Do they need to know this to provide the benefit that I've promised them? And if not, stop. I teach MBA students, and I have to realize I can't tell them everything I've learned from 30 years of business. I have to figure out what do they need to know, what will help them the most. And so that's sort of your attitude also.
Cool, Dad. And I suffer from that as well. It might be the attorney's curse. I'm not sure. But finally, we're down to the last two steps. We're getting there. We're almost done with the presentation structure. But step 6 is to quickly review. So what you want to do is briefly restate the best points of your presentation, the really strongest points. So if you provided a roadmap, and hopefully you did, if the presentation was long enough to call for it, use that as a device for your review. But don't give the talk again, that's for sure. As good as your talk was, nobody wants to hear it twice back to back. But repeating your roadmap signals to the audience that you're about done. And kind of what I just said, let me repeat it. No matter how captivating your presentation, and with our help, I can almost assure you it will be captivating, your audience is likely to be about ready for you to wrap it up. So don't disappoint them. After your roadmap, your presentation should be just about finished. So that's step 6, briefly restate your best points. But before you close, here's step 7, end with a call to action. So we talked about a call of action a minute ago, and you previewed it earlier in your presentation, either explicitly or by telling your audience that it would be coming soon at the end of your talk. But now that the audience has heard your message, ask them to do something with it, what they could do, should do, or must do next. And there we go. Voila. You now have a presentation structure for your entire career, almost regardless of what industry you're in. This is a presentation structure that should work for you for your entire career. So learn it and follow it. Deviate from it at your peril. As you can tell, we're pretty proud of this stuff. We really encourage you to use it. We think it works. We know it works. So this structure ensures that you address your audience's 5 key questions. Just as a reminder, determine what elements of the structure, if any, should and should not apply to a given presentation, and customize as needed. But the beauty is that even though every presentation is a little bit different, we think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how little customization is actually required. So to recap then, and very briefly, here's your 7-step structure to a great presentation. So 1, use an opening gambit. 2, state your topic, objective, and audience benefit, the WIFI. 3, preview your call to action. 4, provide a roadmap and time forecast. 5, deliver your message. 6, quickly review, and I do mean quickly. And 7, end with a strong call to action. So there you have it. There's the 7 steps. Yep.
If I can just say one thing on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for summarizing the structure. Just 1 through, if you wanted to break the structure into 3s, 1 through 4 are your introduction.
Yep.
Which again, I should take 5 minutes or less.
Yep.
Number 5 is your second major thing. That's your message. Yep. And then 6 and 7 are how you wrap up and get off the stage, your conclusion. So 1 through 4 are your intro. 5's the meat of your presentation. Steps 6 and 7 are how you exit gracefully and to wild applause.
Right, absolutely. And if you've watched our stuff before or read our book, we like to think and organize in 3s, and it really makes sense here. Steps 1 through 4, and then step 5, which is the meat of the actual presentation, and then step 6 and 7. So that makes great sense. So 3 acts, nothing you can't handle, that's for sure. Okay, so that's it for the structure part. Now let's go to the mailbag, as we always do. We enjoy this part of our Zoominars, and we're going to take a few questions. So here we go. The first one is from Sue in Sault Ste. Marie. So I've been told recently that Sault Ste. Marie actually straddles the USA-Canada border, and each country has its own town, or each has its own part of Sault Ste. Marie. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but anyways, there's some good hockey players from up there, I'm sure, and I'm also sure that it's pretty cold. So Sue writes and wants to know, she writes, I'm terrified of giving presentations. I avoid them like the plague. It's a common problem. So why am I so nervous, and what can I do about it? So Dad, you want to take the first part of Sue's question, and I'll take a shot at the second about how or what she can actually do about it.
Sure. So I think Sue from Sault Ste. Marie, don't feel bad about being nervous. You are certainly not alone. Speaking before a group, studies show it's the #1 top provoking anxiety event that people have. More than fear of flying, more than spiders, more than heights, more than even death, apparently. And hence the old Jerry Seinfeld joke about, well, if that's really true, that means that most people at the funeral would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. I suspect given that choice, they would rather give the public speak. But anyway, studies say that more than 70% of the adult population fears public speaking. So if you don't feel bad about being nervous. And Nick referenced earlier that Warren Buffett went back and took a Dale Carnegie speaking course. He dropped out of it the first time. He was so nervous giving speeches that he couldn't do it. Wow. And he made himself go back. and finish it.
Right.
So why the anxiety, just real quickly? Well, number one is nobody wants to make a fool of themselves in public, and your public speaking ability is part of the brand of what you bring business wise to the table. Number two, people don't know how to present. Nobody teaches it in college. If they do, it's an elective, and most people don't take it. It's not taught in law schools. I only know one law school that teaches public speaking. MBA schools do a little bit better, but most people don't go to MBA school. And so they don't know how to do it. So the way they learn is they watch business presenters, most of whom are horrific. And so there's really not a lot to learn from most presenters. And then the last one is, I'd say why people are anxious is they know they're not ready. They really don't know their presentation. They haven't learned it. And that's an anxiety event, a producing event. So they're uncomfortable. The audience picks up on their uncomfortableness. They give a lousy presentation that reinforces their belief they hate to do it. So Nick, I'd say that's why all the anxiety.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'd also add that I think a little fear is maybe even a good thing when it comes to presenting. Speaking just for myself, although I bet I'm not alone. There's nothing like a little fear to sharpen my focus. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I've talked on Zoom before about my law school days, and the professors and the classes that I was most scared of. It's really the professors more than the subject matter that I was most scared of. I made sure to be over prepared for those classes if I could, because I was, because I feared what would happen if I wasn't prepared. So a little fear can kind of sharpen the knife. And just to reinforce that, some of the most accomplished and famous musicians, people you've certainly heard of before, admit to stage fright before their performances. So these are some people who have been performing live for decades. In some cases, they still get stage fright. They still get scared of performing in front of an audience. So if those sorts of people can still get nervous before they present, basically to give a show, then we're certainly entitled to be. So don't feel bad about it. But there's some things you can do about it. So first, I just referenced it, but over prepare. So practice until you master your presentation, then practice it one more time. The best way, I think, to overcome pre-presentation jitters is to remind yourself before you begin that you have a message that's going to benefit your audience, that they need to hear what you have to say. It's important, and it'll benefit them and really help them. So focus on them and not on yourself. That might help take a little stress away from you. But also remind yourself, because it's absolutely true, that you've more than prepared for this presentation. You've mastered what you're going to say. You haven't memorized the material like in a play or in some kind of theater or movie. You know the material. But having said that, here's point number two, tip number two: memorize your launch. I'm not saying to memorize your presentation verbatim, but memorize your launch. So memorize your opening gambit through your topic, objective, and audience benefit. So your opening gambit through your WIFI. So doing so is an antidote to anxiety at a time when you're going to be most nervous, that is the very beginning of your presentation, and allows you to start fully focused on your audience because you know what you're going to say. So don't worry about appearing stilted or about appearing robotic. You're not going to say it exactly as you learned it, and that's okay. It'll appear more natural that way. But once you begin speaking, it's likely that the words will spill out naturally and intelligently because you're so prepared. So, Sue, I hope that helps. Our next question comes from a name that I love. That's Biff in Hill Valley, California. Hello, Biff. He says, I like your structure, but as to step 3, which is state your topic, objective, and audience benefit, could you flip the last 2 items? So putting the audience benefit after the topic and before your objective. So Dad, I might send that one to you if that's okay.
Sure. Biff, you're spot on. You can do that all day long and it should work fine. So it'd flow like this. Here's the topic, which you would give in 2 parts before, the broad and the narrow. Here's why you should care about it and what's in it for you. In other words, the WIFI. And now, given that, here's what I hope to accomplish this morning, today, this afternoon, etc. So sometimes I do it this way. If it just feels like it flows better, the reason we've presented it the way we did is I kind of like ending with the audience WIFI. So rather than putting it in the middle, topic, WIFI, objective, I kind of like saying, here's my objective, and now, here's your benefit when I achieve that objective. So in that way, when you say this is really important, you're talking both about the topic and the fact that it's important that you achieve your objective. It's important to them. But that's all, those are all shades of gray and nuanced. If you do the topic, then the audience benefit, then your objective, you'll have a fine presentation. It should work really well. So Good. Thank you for that, because that is a good point to know. There's really not magic in the order of those two. All right, last question of the day. Gary in Münster, Germany, wants to know why most business presentations are so dreadful. So Nick, I'll start and then you
Sure.
finish and we'll wrap up. So Gary, I'd say, first of all, most are, and I often, having sort of a perverted sense of humor and what I enjoy, I often sit in the back of the room and really take interest in somebody's graphics and how they've organized their speech and how they're coming at it. And most aren't very good, to be honest. And the usual suspects are horrific graphics. That's not the topic of today's discussion, but just way too cluttered number slides, way too many text slides, too much text on the text slides. So terrible graphics. People really don't know how to do PowerPoint. Death by PowerPoint. Number two would be they haven't learned the speech. They're busy. They just haven't had time or haven't made time. Great speakers make their speech look effortless, but great speakers also know it's anything but effortless. You really have to slog the time. And if you're busy or you don't put much importance in it, which is crazy to me because it's you on public display, they don't know it. And then the last one is they don't answer the audience's 5 questions, and mainly the one about, well, they don't make clear what it is they're talking about and why. What's the benefit to the audience? So those to me are the 3 things that really drive bad theater. There used to be a Saturday night skit called Bad Theater. It was a recurring skit, and they would show movie clips from really bad movies. And most business presentations are bad theater.
Thanks, Dad. I would agree with you and agree with Gary from Münster as well that most business presentations, if not downright horrific, or at least probably pretty boring. So with our help, hopefully you can do better. So, and I also would agree, and I'm going to add real quickly that the presenter, I think, not the topic, determines what makes a great presentation, at least most of the time. So I've attended lectures and presentation on what sounds like the driest stuff imaginable. I'm talking about legal ed courses on tax, on trust and estates, on surety law, gosh, and on and on. Sounds awful, sounds dry, but actually they turned out to be riveting presentations because the presenters were so good. And then on the flip side, I've suffered through many presentations that I thought would be interesting because the subject matter appealed to me for whatever reason, but they were ultimately ruined by an unprepared and or ineffective presenter. So to me, it's similar to college courses. The best professors can make any subject compelling and make any subject kind of come alive, while the worst professors can make what should be the most exciting topics dry and dreary. So it's really, the magic is in the presenter, even more so than the topic, I think. So, in addition to being authors, of course, the Look Out Above team has also spent much time in real estate. So I'll give you, Gary and Münster, an example from that world. So real estate conference speakers routinely tell their audience what their company does and how successful it is, blah, blah, blah. And to that, we say, who cares? So to us, the burden is on the speaker to make her remarks relevant to me as an audience member. Tell me how to build my company, or tell me how to apply what has worked for her, or how I can learn from her mistakes. Tell me something I can use that rewards me for listening. So I'd say leave it to your introducer, if you have one, as a presenter, to recap your company's accomplishments. Don't do it for yourself, or don't do it yourself. People don't want to hear that. So on that positive note, that's it for today's Zoominar session. I say this every time, but it's certainly true. We really enjoy these sessions. We enjoy putting them together, and we hope you enjoy watching them. Thanks to all who've submitted questions. And if you do have any questions in the future, or topics for future Zoominars, or other comments or words of encouragement or anything, just want to say hello, please leave us a message at our website. Again, that's bobandnickslater.com. And make sure to follow us on social media for Look Out Above updates and content. It's pretty good, if I do say so myself. And as we always do, we'd like to remind you that our book is available via Amazon for the criminally low price of $21.99. I know, $21.99, you exclaim incredulously, but yes, it's true, at least for now. So you'll hop on that immediately. The holidays are coming up. So that's a hint, hint. If you haven't checked the book out yet, please do so. And as for our next Zoominar, we will be back in just under 2 weeks. That's on Wednesday, November 4th at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usual time and usual day. Today was a bit of an anomaly with the Friday session, but hope you enjoyed it. Next time, we're going to be discussing negotiation, so you'll want to clear your calendars for that. Thank you again for being here with us today and for your questions, and we hope that you have a great and productive week. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.